The great mystic Carmelite, stigmatized Miriam of Jesus Crucified, pleaded with the Holy Father on behalf of the Lord that every priest throughout the Catholic world should offer once a month the Mass of the Holy Spirit. I try to do it as far as I possibly can, and I also have for years now a devotion which I learned later St. John Paul II had, to pray every day on Our Father, one Hail Mary, and one Glory Be, for each of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. So 7 times each of those 3, asking specifically for the gift in question, in such a way that He is in the driving seat, and that concerns each one here. Until we hand over that control panel to the Holy Spirit, we are doing our own thing. I want to take you to a few moments in history when that was happening or not happening. I was formed initially in a now closed monastery in France. I was there for over 7 years, Célignac de Chartreuse. It was the first one opened after the expulsions way back in 1926, whereas the Grand Chartreuse was only opened during the war, but secretly. That's not a story. But we were aware of our heritage, and part of that heritage was what we remember actually on the 4th of May and onwards. The first martyrs, they were the Carthusians. And we know from the inside story that things happened. Even theologians were confused, bishops were confused or shy. But they knew the importance of the situation, and they decided to offer a Mass of the Holy Spirit in conventu at the high altar, that very Mass that we're singing right now with the same melodies, in red, in the old Carthusian rite. And we have testimony of something that happened at that point. At a certain point, a holy point, they all saw something huge. Over their heads appeared tongues of fire. And they knew that they were going to be inspired and given strength to speak. And so they did. And in 2 waves, first of all the priors, and then a good number of brethren had an awful, awful time. The priors were the first, and Thomas More saw them from the Tower of London go on the rickety hurdle, they called it, a thing behind horses without wheels, through the streets of London up to the Tyburn Hill, where they were given the supreme punishment of being hanged, drawn and quartered for high treason. But it didn't stop there at all. Eventually, more were taken in, and they were placed in this terrible dungeon in stocks, unable to move, completely immobile, suspended in this position until they died, with no let-up at all to do anything at all. The last to die was William Horne, a lay brother, and he has a special feast in the order. Now, you may notice that tongues appear at Pentecost. Therefore, the Word is going to be central to the life of the Church. Only one bishop spoke out, St. John Fisher of Rochester, and one layman in Parliament, Thomas More. Where were the others? I want to make a jump much later in time. It was something that I experienced in France. That same Holy Spirit out and about, unchanged and ever unchanging, ever fresh and ever powerful. In the mid-80s, there was a lot going on in France at the time, and new congregations were being born. They had one thing in common: they were very open to the gifts of the Spirit, and they emphasized adoration and beautiful liturgy, going on for hours and hours, but with all the gifts of the Spirit. And they were growing at the rate of 2 monasteries per year in different countries. And we were trying to do something with regard to bringing them over to Britain and specifically to Wales. I just want to give testimony of some of the things I saw when out there with them in the mid-80s. We were at Ars, where the Curevaras had been, Saint Jean-Marie Vianney, and it was interesting that the same Spirit who had given those gifts to Saint Jean-Marie Vianney was unchanged in his generosity, and in that same place was manifesting himself with those gifts that are not fakeable. Notice that bit, the real thing. And for that to happen, we need to be careful that we don't confuse the levels or lack discernment, which is precisely a gift of the Spirit, aware of what is authentic and what is not. Which brings me to a little parenthesis. What is nowadays called charismatic is too easily labeled so. It is not enough to sing certain songs, to behave in a certain physical way, to have a certain jargon, to be actually charismatic, no matter if a group has the name. Charismatic comes from the Greek charisma, which means a gift of the Spirit. And if those gifts, I mean the real ones, are not there, it is only a glorified prayer group. Truly charismatic prayer groups and congregations have something of the experience of Pentecost, which is precisely the unfaked and the real, where the supernatural breaks through. And this is what I want to take you for a minute. It was at Ars, and there were thousands upon thousands of people there. So much so that there were more people than they had gambled for. And therefore we knew that the Lord took control of that too. It had happened the previous year that they had only a bit of food left, but they kept on giving it out nevertheless. And it multiplied, and it multiplied, and it multiplied in their hands, until the last was fed, and there was still more over. But when I was there, this was going on before my eyes. At a certain point, the whole massive assembly in the basilique, there's a basilica in Ars now, a huge edifice, and we went into prayer mode, and it was moving. There was a presence in the air. There was a power in the air. And then it started. And coup sur coup, one after the other, it was happening. And all the gifts were combined in perfect synchronization. The gift of knowledge would be accompanying the gift of miracles and prophecy all together in such a way that in the midst of that huge assembly, we knew exactly what was going on. At that point, a person's leg was growing to the same size as that of the other leg. There, a person suffering sterility was being healed. There, a person was guilty of murder, and the Lord was calling him forth. He had to go to a priest. There, and on it went, all on video. And they were so powerful, these miracles were happening before our eyes, that the instinct was for them to applaud the Lord for his greatness. And from those who were controlling this huge event came this word, repeated: Gardez le silence. Gardez le silence. The Spirit didn't want agitation, not to interrupt the flow of power. Silence! And the miracles continued, and the word of knowledge accompanied each time. That, my friends, was the real thing, not what we refer to as the unscrewing of bulbs to look convincing. We don't have to have the trimmings, and the trimmings can take away, as I pointed out, to the calm power of the Spirit, who acts more freely without agitation. I make a jump in time. Here in Ireland, I was with Breda Laffey, who's just died. She had great gifts. When I was a novice at Kindercraft, she was praying over me and she saw the future. And she saw this. She heard into Ibo Adaltare Dei, Adem Quilitificat Juventute Meam, and she saw me going up altar steps. That was unimaginable in 1991. It all came true. Eddie Stones, with whom I became quite pally eventually, backwards and forwards to Clonfert, so much so that he wanted me to be his chaplain at one point. But he saw things too. He saw, for instance, what's happening at this very moment. He saw that there would be a time when the word of teaching would be going out over a large area and reaching many ears and hearts and minds. He saw it all in the future. These were the authentic gifts, not the happy-clappy, which can be confounded with it easily. And by the way, the real thing is easy to detect because, for instance, knowledge is either true or false. I mentioned Eddie Stones. Ellen would always take me there. She would also go back and forth to him. And when he was coming to the area, Ruffingham to Nobber down near King's Court, she wanted to go there, and she was working at Headford as a chef, and she could see the time going by. I wanted to get away, she said, but these last orders were coming in. What are these? Lemon meringue pies. So she did these lemon meringue pies at high speed, sent them off to the hungry clients, and whizzed off to Nobber to hear him holding forth. And she got in late. But there he was, holding forth, as he would, with all these gifts. And he could see things. There's a person with a broken leg being healed. There's pancreatic cancer, that's going to be healed. Here, I can see lemon meringue pies. So on he went, and Ellen at the end went up to him. Eddie, that was me. What does that mean? Oh, he said, the Lord's telling you, he hasn't forgotten you. These, my friends, are the unfakeable gifts. Don't confuse them. And nor must you confuse what's going on in the church right now. A lot of things are done in the name of the Holy Spirit which have much more to do with man. I've just been reading the very good book of Bishop Emeritus Michael Smith on the council years at which he was present as a little secretary. He goes through all the events, all the documents, all the important people, everything, indicating how everything was completely organized and under the control of a higher power. It was amazing how this huge number of bishops from all over the world were able somehow to get through all these documents over a period of years, analysing every single word with great filtration from greatest theologians around. Not a single word could be voted in without the approval of all the bishops, or at least a great majority. That was a moment of grace. And it led to what was certainly a good idea, that there should be a support for the Holy Father over the regular convening of bishops. Not all, but enough for him to get the ear and the advice. The synod. Now, names are being used to, as it were, get people to think in that term, but not to see exactly the difference of what's going on. An ecumenical council, by its very nature, claims that protection of the Holy Spirit of which the Gospel speaks. I will lead you into all truth. It was already there in Jerusalem. You put a select and small number of people, including lay people, together with loud voices, you cannot in the same way claim that promise. And what you're going to do, if you're not careful, is listen to the loudest voice. And you know what noise means. It means the language of hell, which is full of noise. I told you that in Acts, the Spirit wanted silence and stillness to act. Put noise in the midst, and you've got another dynamic coming in. Be careful, because what is done in there with the Holy Spirit may not be entirely under his guidance, but the noisiest voice carrying the day. So, discernment and calm. Because, my friends, you too have the Holy Spirit. It's called the sense of the faithful, and massively the whole church has it, not just a small group of noisy people. The whole church has that gift of being led calmly as a huge body, the mystical body, by that inner dynamic which is the Holy Spirit. And therefore, no matter how much noise eventually somebody may make in high places, in the name of the Holy Spirit, I mean in synodal mode, e.g. in Germany, there will be that serene possession of the truth by its author himself, which will talk all through the church to the lay people yourselves, who will say, no, we don't accept this noise. We can't change the truth. The Spirit of truth is unchanging, and he is calm, and he doesn't follow the mode of today or tomorrow. We are not over the truth. We are under it. And our job is not to teach the Holy Spirit, to let him teach us. And for that to happen, we say, over to you, Lord. And until that happens, man is in calm.